Hi, I'm Terry Arnold, and I have with me Martha Van Dam. And Martha and I were laughing off camera because she was flashing her fan here because she's having a hot flash in Florida today. Martha, you and I are going to have a hard time keeping this to one topic
We are.
and brief because
We are.
we've known each other a long time.
That's true. Oh gosh, that's true, because it's been ever since 2016 when I contacted you and said, "What is this? Help."
Well, why don't you tell people a little bit about your story with inflammatory breast cancer, but also, and not to put you under any kind of pressure, but since you are a healthcare professional, mental health care professional, I think that the mental health issues of dealing with an advanced cancer is not well served. And I think you're going to have a unique perspective being on what I call either side of that coat of being a patient and also being a therapist. I know when I first got diagnosed, a therapist told me, "Oh, don't be worried. Everybody thinks they're going to die and they have cancer." And I go, "No, they really think I'm going to die." And so, how do we talk about that and not be afraid, and also have some coping skills, and just start where you feel like starting in
I
between the
do
hot
think,
flashes.
yeah, put it right there. I do think being a therapist helped me to go through the ordeal. It did not, I wouldn't say it made it any easier. The shock, the upset, the grief, all of those things, all of the fear, it didn't make that go away. But in this odd sort of way, it helped. The skills that I had, the understanding of what was going on helped, because I literally would talk myself through. I would say, "Oh, okay, I understand what's happening here. This is grief, or this is fear, or this is," and it helped me just knowing what was happening, because I didn't have the additional fear of the unknown of what was happening in my head. So
Well, I'm sure that made it easier.
it
No, I
did.
think it made, I can see that now.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about your story. We have shared some of the broadcasts that podcasts you've done with other organizations, so people can, look up Martha Van Dam and you'll see things on our website. But tell everybody who might not be familiar a little bit about your diagnosis process, like, how you first discovered you had IBC, your diagnosis process. Then we'll just go from there.
I almost wish, and kind of like not really, but I almost wish I could take a picture of what my breasts look like, because I do have photographs, and put it where people could see kind of regularly. I'm not going to put that in my office. That would be like highly inappropriate. But my breast did not have a lot of symptoms. And when I see pictures with like a big rash or a lot of the different of the looking skin, I think, yeah, mine didn't look that bad. Mine only, so I woke up in the morning on a Friday morning, went to get dressed, and noticed that from the underside of my breast, all I could see was the part coming under was this pink, the same kind of pink you might have if you've been in the sun just a little bit. You watch your kid play a ball game and you come in after a while and you go, I think I got a little pink. And it was just that little bit. And it was just on the underside, covered probably as much as my hand, but I have fairly large breasts. So all I saw was the part that was peeking up. And when I first saw it, I just thought, "Oh, that's weird." Okay. And I got dressed, didn't think anything else about it. And then when I got undressed in that evening and it was still there, suddenly it struck me, oh, I actually have heard of a breast cancer that shows up looking like a rash. So then by then it's Friday evening, but I started to get worried and Googled, which, is a good thing and a bad thing, who knows. But I did read enough by Googling to find out really more about inflammatory breast cancer. The more I read, the more I thought, oh, this is not looking good, because it was symptomatic. It had come on fast, all those things. And so the next first thing Monday morning, I called my gynecologist and told her, "I have this rash. I'm concerned it might be inflammatory breast cancer." I said that, and I said, we need to do something. And she right away got me in to have a mammogram and an ultrasound. And so then by the time I got in to see had the mammogram, we all know that, and I knew from Googling that it often doesn't show up in a mammogram. So literally when I did the mammogram and there was nothing there, I thought, oh, that's bad. That's really bad.
Isn't that funny that you would think that?
Yes. I mean, I was like almost to tears. This, I know this is bad. And then when they took me over to the ultrasound, my husband was in the room with me. And the moment that I won't forget is, she's doing her little thing. And of course, I don't really see what she's doing, but I see her stop when she's under my arm and she starts clicking, click, click, click. And she's doing the measurements. And I can see well enough to see she's measuring something under my arm. I look up at my husband and we both had this look of, oh. And I can remember him having a look that kind of said, I'm so sorry. And I felt to him, I'm so sorry. I know where this is, we know where this is going. And of course, they didn't tell me anything other than I needed a biopsy from that. And I went to a local surgeon, and this is all happening pretty fast. You know how once this stuff starts rolling, if they are taking care of you, it starts rolling pretty fast. So within days.
It's feast or famine. Either it's terribly slow or it's boom, boom, boom.
Yes, because we have heard of some people that they're saying a few weeks and to do the next test or something. And you're thinking, no. Well, thankfully, they did get me in. And so let's see, that surgeon I'm not sure if he did the actual correct biopsies that I should have had. He did not do a punch biopsy. He did what he called a wedge biopsy. So we cut into the pink, took out a wedge.
See, that's not good.
Yeah, I know, because he actually cut into live cancer, ultimately, is what he did.
Right. That's exactly right.
Yeah. And later on, after all this was way past, I realized, it's from the very beginning. And then he did a biopsy under my arm, which he took out this really big, he said a big chunk of stuff. He wasn't sure what it was. And he said that he was 99% sure that it was not cancer. And Terry, the wedge biopsy in the pink part did not show up positive. So when I go to see him a week later, they've determined that it's breast cancer that's in the arm, under the arm, and that it was HER2 positive, estrogen, receptor negative, and we immediately, you know how then that ball starts rolling. Holy cow! It was within days, and they were trying to get me in. Well, actually, come to think of it, that surgeon did something that was wrong after that too, because we were in on a Monday, and I got the news, and he scheduled me for a mastectomy on Wednesday.
See, that is terrifying, which means they didn't know what you had.
He didn't know. He said,
and why would you schedule somebody for mastectomy without doing PET scans and other things to make sure you know what's going on? That even if you didn't have inflammatory, it's like there needs to be a little bit of something, I want to back up one thing though. I'm really glad you brought up that settled presentation. I'll tell you why. We hear all the time about, you see those pictures of that poor one lady that's all on the internet, and it's a picture of that big peeled orange look. And people, and I've had doctors tell patients, you can't possibly have IBC, you don't look like that. Right. That's what you look like after a few months. We don't want you to look that way. We don't want that. And so I'm grateful when women do share pictures, and we have quite a few pictures on our website of different presentations, because there's like 12 different symptoms. I've known women who've only had incredibly itching and didn't have the swelling. Or I knew one lady, she had a red streak on the top, like a dog ticker. Right. The scratch, and it didn't heal. And she thought, wait, skin's not broken. What is this red streak? Right. So I'm glad that you're bringing up the real settled presentation, but I'm also glad you're bringing up that sometimes in the panic, the doctors start moving forward when it's not an appropriate course of action. Right. So you had to then go from something's wrong, oh crap, and by the way, don't do the mastectomy. Let's take a minute and do more. Yeah, it was crazy because we left the doctor's office. My husband and I sat in the car, and looked like within a couple of days I was going to be having mastectomy. And so we sat in the car and started making lists of who do we need to call, what do we need to do, and immediately started calling. Call my parents, call my kids. It's kind of a big deal. And when he said that we were going to do the surgery, he also gave me a reason. He said, we want to get that cancer load out of your body. So that made sense to me at the time. Wow. And so we went ahead and scheduled everything. He let me know the hospital would be contacting me, and the next day or something with an actual time to be there, all the things they do. And then the next call I got a day or two later, I guess, was from his office and he said that I've spoken with the oncologist. The oncologist says we need to do chemotherapy first, but then he went on and said, I don't like that idea. I think we need to get the cancer out of your body, but he's the oncologist. So we're going to go with what he said. Well, see, that's the thing. Surgeons want to cut, and I get it. That's what they do, and they do well. Yes. But we've been giving women chemotherapy before surgery for 20 years. And what the position, personally, the position that, as I do remember that feeling of feeling like, oh, dear Lord, here's two professionals. They differ, and somehow it feels like it's up to me to make the decision. Well, I call that, it's like you're being a little kid and mommy and daddy are fighting. You don't
Yeah,
know who to listen to. You don't know
right.
what to do. And that's one of the scary things about when women will contact me and say, my local doctor disagrees with what the specialists say at Duke or MD Anderson or
Oh,
Dana-Farber. And then who do I listen to? And it's like you're caught in the middle.
you
Then
are.
here you are supposed to be, I think patients have a place at the table in their care, but
Mhm.
also we need an educated place at the table.
Yeah, I don't want to make a decision, a life or death decision, if I don't have the information, if I don't have the training, if I don't know what I'm dealing with. Now, if
Right.
I have all the information, you're right. I want to see the table, I want a voice. But I sure don't want two professionals telling me, no, you need to get it out. No, no, we need to fight it before we get it out. Oh, why? Which one's going to kill me?
Yeah. Yeah.
And fortunately, I didn't make the decision. Fortunately, the surgeon just said, he's the oncologist. We have to go with what he says.
Well, I'm glad for that because I've known women who've gotten really quick mastectomies when they were even diagnosed properly with IBC and unfortunately didn't go well. I know some who've made it. Like you said, you're cutting into live cancer. We can come back another time. So obviously, spoiler alert, you didn't die, you're good. It's been
Right.
since 2016. And when people listen to this 20 years ago, when history has erased IBC, this is in 2022. So you've had many years of wellness.
And when I finished with the chemotherapy, I was considered, we had a complete response.
So
So
you
there was nothing when they went in to they did a PET scan prior to surgery. They saw where some of the lymph tissue didn't look right, but like scarred or something. And so then after surgery, they said there's nothing there. You have
okay,
you
well,
have no
good.
cancer. Yeah.
Well,
So
good. So, okay, so you got through the treatment, and again, you and I could talk forever, but like I'd like to think it'd be interesting because you were in this place where you had to advocate for yourself with these doctors. You said that you didn't have to decide; they ultimately decided, but still, you still could have said no, I want or whatever. But what tips would you want to share with IBC sisters or people maybe not used to navigating the medical system? Or some of the coping skills. You gave great presentations at the Ultimate Meetup in Nashville
thank you.
about coping skills. Or what do you want to share with people?
Well, we've started down this path of having to be aware of what the accurate or the best treatment is, and knowing that is helpful. And that reminds me, remember there was that other piece, this was the surgeon who did my mastectomy was a different surgeon from the one who did the biopsies. And so I went looking for another surgeon. I wanted a surgeon to do a mastectomy. I wanted a surgeon who really knew IBC, who had done lots of breast work. And so I found who I thought to be that person at and I'm not going to say names here, but at a major teaching hospital in the South. And she was the head breast surgeon in that hospital. And she is the one, and this story, Terry, I'll try to do it as quickly as possible, but she's the one who really tried to push me to have reconstruction on the table. So she also clearly didn't know either. Surely she didn't know. Surely she wouldn't know.
No, I'm sure she didn't know.
Right. And so she
Well,
really
I'm going to
didn't
back you up here for a second so people listening who might not know why women shouldn't get same-day reconstruction of mastectomy. Because I do know women who've done it, and I know women who've done well, but again, often they don't. So it doesn't mean if that's in your story that you won't do well, but it might be good to get some reviews. But what it is IBC is webby diffuse like cotton candy. So when you get the chemotherapy, it shrinks everything down because it's hard to get what they call clean margins. And IBC, you might have, you've got a piece of cancer right here, but all of a sudden way over here, there's one little rug, whatever. So they do a really large surgical field and shrink that down. And then they want to do radiation. And when you put a breast mound on top, you have compromised the level that they have to shoot those beams into your body to be the most effective. And also, reconstruction has its own timeline of needs. So often when people get same day reconstruction, it's not a deep or a tram where they take fat from your tummy or your back and bring it out. They put in expanders. And so now what you've got is something that conflicts, because if you want the breast to be able to expand, guess what you do? You leave a little tissue to get, to help that skin stretch. And so then now, and expanders also have to be filled, or they get infected. Those pockets will get infected. So you've got timelines that disagree with your care for cancer and your care for reconstruction. And then you get radiation. Well, radiation makes things a little bit like beef jerky.
Yeah.
So this thing that you're trying to expand is going to be a bit of a shriveled raven, shall we say? It's not going to be the most attractive outcome. So you're not going to get a good outcome usually, and you're putting yourself in conflict of what the rest of your care is. So for inflammatory, they recommend you wait a good 2 full years. There's some doctors that it has come into light that they think you can wait 1 year after surgery, which doesn't freak me out. It used to worry me, but I understand now. But they recommend not using expanders because the risk of failed reconstruction be quite high because radiated skin doesn't stretch well. And then if you do get reconstruction, you get a deeper tram. So again, you were in a place of compromise at a major center.
And I'll tell you, we've talked about this too, how hard it was standing up to the professional. I am a professional, but I still had a hard time standing up to this woman who was saying, she literally said to me, "You'll be lopsided." Yeah, I know that. I've cried bitter tears over that. That's why I'm not happy about this. But and then when I told her that I didn't expect to ever have reconstruction and that I hoped I would never have to have another surgery. So I said, please know that you are my reconstruction. So please make me pretty. Please make it as smooth as possible is what I was thinking. I don't want to have to come back in. And I'd looked enough online to see that there are different kinds of scars. So when I asked her about the different types of scars, I was going to ask her if it was possible, and I didn't know enough about surgery, but just if it's possible. I'd seen some incisions that leave like just kind of rounded at the bottom. They look a little bit less jarring than the gash. And so I was just going to ask her whether this would have been possible or not. I have no idea. That was my point, but she didn't answer it. When I asked her, I told her that I had been looking at pictures of different scars. She wanted to know, she said, well, have you been looking at photographs or cartoons? And cartoon, yeah, I'm looking at cartoons. Yeah, no, I'm not looking at cartoons. I'm looking at photographs, and I'm just wanting to ask, is it possible to have this finished look when I have surgery? I never, ever felt like she understood, which was a surprise to me, especially as a woman. It was surprising to me that she didn't seem to grasp I was concerned about the way I was going to look after, and I was not having reconstruction for my health. So anyway,
and one of the things, it's funny how sometimes women can be hard on women when we think we're going to be on the same team. It's just personalities. But I know that one of my doctors asked me, why did I did get reconstruction after 10 years. Both were gone, both had cancer. But I remember one doctor was pushing at me very early into my time to get it. And I remember him telling me, don't you want to be a woman? I'm thinking, that's not what makes me a woman. There's a lot more to this. And it's weird how people put their stuff on you. And I'm glad, and it's weird, even though you are someone that's professional and you're an educated woman, I feel like when something goes wrong in our life, we're all of a sudden 5. It's not a level playing field. And especially when you're not feeling good, because surely at some point along here, you're not at your best.
No, by that point in time, the time I was talking to her, I had at least 5 of the 6 treatments. I was not, I'd lost 30 pounds. I could hardly sit up some of the time. I did not have a good physical reaction to the chemo. It was hard on my body. And you're right. I felt like I was at my weakest point. And at my weakest point, I was having to stand up and fight. And that was not easy. I never left her office that I wasn't in tears. It was just hard.
That's so hard. And then, and I think about, your husband, because I know your husband is like, I know my husband came to me at one point when I was trying to get diagnosed. They kept dismissing me, saying there's nothing wrong with me. He said, well, maybe you can let this go, TL. They're telling you you're not sick. And I finally opened my shirt one day and I said, look at my breast. He goes, oh yeah, that is definitely a broken booby, And I'm like, because you want to believe them when they tell you something, but your gut goes,
yeah.
I'm not feeling good here about this.
Exactly. So
I just even doing the wedge box, he was kind of aggressive. If you think about it, for such subtle symptoms, and not just doing a punch.
No, And then what he told me later was that particular first surgeon, he told me, I've seen hundreds of these. Well, later on, I think it was either you or Angela who said, yeah, he probably hasn't seen hundreds of these. There aren't that many that he could have come across of IBC. So no, he doesn't really know what he's talking about.
I hear doctors say that a lot. I'm dealing with a couple right now out of Georgia that the doctor was doing all the wrong things and they end up at a good place, and I feel better about that. But their doctor told him, he says he sees hundreds of IBC patients a year, and he lives in a tiny little town in Georgia. I thought, you can't possibly, just to give people frame of reference, MD Anderson has about 100 IBC active cases on their books at any given time, and Dana-Farber's about 80, so they're not far behind them. So if you've got the two specialty clinics in the US that are the highest volume clinic, and they're seeing 100 cases, 100,
Right.
you know, if you're in some small town somewhere and your doctor goes, I see this all day long, let that be a warning flag.
And so I think the takeaway from this piece of what we're talking about for me is I look back, it's great with hindsight to look back and think what, I wish I'd known. But given the choice to do it all over again, I think it would have been wise for me to go at least have a second opinion at a designated clinic, a specialty clinic like MD Anderson, Dana-Farber, Duke. Just because then I would absolutely know. I wouldn't have had the glitches that I had. And then I would right now be more confident, because there is a piece of me that still thinks, if she didn't really recognize IBC, or if she didn't know about the surgery part, did she do exactly everything? I don't know what she did in there. I'm not in there. And so I don't really, there's a piece of me that thinks, I hope it was done right. And I hope if it wasn't, it won't hurt me. So
it's funny you would say that, because there's a lot of things I think that are hard to live with. And I've heard people say that sometimes guilt or sin, they use this word sometimes interchangeably, is hard to live with. I think you can forgive yourself. You can be forgiven. There's things you can make up for, but doubt will eat you up.
Yeah.
And I tell women, and I know there's a cost and stress involved, and not everybody's insurance cooperates, not everybody even has insurance, but like I tell women all the time, if you've got a diagnosis like this, try to go to specialty center, because it doesn't mean your local doctor won't do a good job, but you can eliminate that doubt. But also you're helping research, because it gives them that much more tissue and experience to help the rest of the world later. But also, if you were going to get your kitchen remodeled, you wouldn't take the first bid. You would talk to a few people.
True.
This is a really big deal. So if you can, I think it's a good idea. Obviously, they say the party line is don't delay treatment to go be seen at a specialty center.
Right.
And I get that, but I think it's a good idea to loop them in. It's a win-win for everybody if it's possible. But
I get that.
Who knew? I didn't know that was considered to be the most fatal form of breast cancer isn't taught in medical school. I didn't know it wasn't presented at the San Antonio Breast Cancer Symposium, because rare diseases aren't presented. And
that's why we have a job, to let people know, so that when they do, if you get the flu or you get strep throat or something, we all have a little basic understanding of what we need to do, and we don't have all these unknowns. If inflammatory breast cancer were better, just more public knowledge, actual awareness, we are aware of breast cancer. We're real aware, but actual awareness of the rare cancers, then I don't think we'd be so likely to get caught in these spots. Regardless, that's where we are now. So learning for ourselves, reading for ourselves, asking questions, contacting people, and standing up for ourselves. Our lives do depend on some self-advocacy, I think.
I think they do too. And it's interesting, because when I see, and not to knock any kind of breast cancer, all cancer stinks, but I see women who have breast cancer talk about their survivorship or the journey. I hear women with IBC talking about their struggle to be diagnosed. I hear women talking about disconnects in surgery and things like that. And they want this story known, not so someone feels sorry for them or gives them pity or whatever. They want it to be better for you, for your friend or your person, if this should come into their life. And so I think that's a really incredibly noble thing.
To spend our time, our energy, letting people know, so that they don't get so caught up.
Well, and the conversation is changing and is growing, and I'm seeing in the 15 years I've been involved in this community some very hopeful things. So I'm excited about that. What do you feel was something, I myself funny, maybe something was funny that happened when you're in treatment, or something that really caught you off guard, or just some little blip to give somebody a sense of it's going to be okay, even when it stinks, you know,
Yeah. Okay. So I
maybe in
think,
that moment.
yeah, in that funny things, I do remember. So I will tell you, I felt quite traumatized by the whole thing, but there were a few funny moments, and we did get to the place where I realized we're saying things that were not a normal part of life before. I mean, like, oh, there was one time that I was getting dressed and I put the form, my mastectomy is on my left side. I don't know what the heck got into me, but I got up, I grabbed my form, I put it in the right side of my bra. So then when I try to put it on, I know you're frowning. I know. I go, well, that feels weird because it's like a boob and a form and nothing. And I'm thinking, oh, normal people don't have to deal with this. And there was a time when I made a joke with one of my sons about, it was like, it's so cold out there. It's so cold. It's so cold. It'll freeze your titty off or something like that. And he died laughing. He said, oh, you've got jokes. And so,
There's some good dark humor. I remember it was Christmas and I was diagnosed in September. So by Christmas I was bald and green and not feeling my best. And I remember my kids and I remember thinking, am I going to see another Christmas? Is this it? And just wondering. And I remember my kids were hanging ornaments up, and they were all older teens and young adults. My youngest was 14, so my oldest was like, I don't know, 26. And I remember they were putting ornaments on the tree, and one of the kids dropped the ornament, and they were making fun about being Butterfingers. And they went, "Oh, well, your mom's bald." And I thought, wait, I'm sitting right here. The fact that we could joke about certain things
right,
made it okay, and it made it not so stigmatized. And
right.
that little bit of the dark humor.
And my husband and I joke a lot about it, and you're right. That's made it easier at home. We joke all the time. We're headed out, and he'll say, you know how you say, do you have your keys? Do you have your wallet? You know, that's kind of a part of like, did you get your purse? Do you have your jacket? Whatever. And he'll go, do you have your hat? He means my wig. Did you get your hat and your form? You're wearing your boob. I mean, it's just kind of a piece of it's funny. It's lighthearted. Yep, I got it.
Yep. Yep. You talked about in the sense of the loss of everything, how sometimes it's hard to not lose the positives.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. Don't you think?
You want to expand on that sense of overwhelming, because it is an amputation. It changes things. Sometimes you get fired from your job, or your partner goes, "Hey, I didn't sign up for this." Actually, you did. Most of us say, for better or for worse, sickness doesn't help, but a lot of times people go, "Whoa, I didn't really mean that." So how do you deal with the losses and not lose the positives?
So we were talking about that a minute ago, and you made a good point. Something else that we've spoken about a lot, and that's that we don't want to force ourselves into, I will be positive. I will be positive. That's exhausting too, because
they call it toxic positivity for a reason.
Yes. And there's nothing wrong. And it's wonderful to look for the abundance and the blessing in our life, of all parts of our life. Absolutely wonderful. But when we're going through a trauma like that, we also have to be honest and real about the fact that this is a loss. We have been affected by something very big. We may have also, depending on where we are in our mind or our mindset, we also may have faced real big fears. I can't imagine many people that wouldn't face real big fears in this. Now, maybe there's some who just say, I'm not going to worry about it. It's going to be good, and I'm going to keep going. But I got to say, I can't imagine that a little piece of that's not just refusing to look at the potential absolute difficulty.
And I think there's a little bit of, I call fake it till you make it, where you have to kind of force yourself. I remember every morning I'd wake up, and the first thing I thought was, I have cancer. And I would lay there and go, and then I would just tell myself, okay, I'm going to give myself these few minutes to kind of mourn this. Yeah. And then I'm going to put it down and go about my day.
Right.
And I didn't want to pretend everything was perfect, but I didn't want to be buckled up in fear either.
Right. For sure.
And so it was a constant balancing act.
It is. And sometimes one side wins and sometimes the other side wins. I will tell you, you would think that as much understanding as I do really have about grieving and trauma, I treat trauma all the time, other traumas. The magnitude of the sadness and the grief caught me off guard of how big it was. And Terry, when I for all this started rolling and it was a real thing and it was cancer and we're doing the surgery and I got to a place where I just could hardly stop crying. And I called my doctor and said in tears, and I think I left a message, with the receptionist, and through tears, I can't stop crying. I've got breast cancer. And they put me on Xanax for a little while. And I will tell you, I think it was a wonderful thing. Not everybody needs something like that. Yay. If we don't, let's do other skills as well. But it's okay sometimes if we do. And I don't
better living through chemistry, right? I mean, no, it's better living through chemistry. Sometimes you need a little help, but and I think it's interesting too, because people ask me, did I do things like that? Or did I have all the tears and stuff? But see, I was in a different place. And I think those things are important too. Not only are we different people with different life experiences or maybe different support systems or whatever, we had this common disease diagnosis. I was misdiagnosed for 4 months. Yeah. My diagnosis was relief. You went from 0 to 60 and was making big decisions.
Right.
So, I was, yay, I have cancer. Now we can do something.
Yeah.
So you didn't have time to process anything.
No, it was all overwhelming. It really was overwhelming. And then we've talked about this too, based on our previous lives, our experiences, how we've come through to this point. That affects these other things. And things like, I really came to understand how I had tied the idea of breasts to femininity and value, and would I be enticing? Would my husband enjoy me? Would I even look like a woman anymore? I mean, I really struggled with those things. And in the end, it ended up being a healthy thing because I actually had to deal with and settle those things once and for all. I had to. There's no other place.
You are a really pretty woman, and I can see how that would be a big deal. And I think everybody has all kinds of unique beauty. But I know, for myself, we talked this before. I have 2 sisters that are really beautiful, and the joke in the family was I was the smart one. Yeah. So I knew that meant they thought they were the pretty ones, and they are beautiful. But I was the smart one. So losing my hair didn't bother me. Losing my breast didn't really bother me, other than the permanency of it all. I mean, but what bothered me was my brain got mushy in chemo. It was hard on you physically. Oh, yeah. I had no snap.
Mm-hmm.
My son would not let me go to the grocery store by myself when I was going through chemo. He said, I don't trust you to get home.
Yeah.
I'm afraid you're going to get lost. I only lived a mile from the store, but I believe it because I remember one day going by myself and I couldn't find my car. And it was not that big a parking lot. I could not. Yeah. And we didn't have the clicker thing back then. I'm walking around the parking lot going, I called my husband. I said, I think the car's been stolen. He goes, no, you're just confused.
Yeah.
And it turns out I was leaning on my car, calling him, crying, I think the car's been stolen. But in my defense, I took one of my teenage kids' car to the grocery store because it was on the end of the driveway. And I can remember which car I took. So it went downhill. But my brain just turned to mush, and it did come back. But that's what bothered me, was how do I reclaim myself?
See, that's that value piece. That's that piece of somehow, some way we attach parts of us, our intelligence, our ability to think, our looks, we attach our ability to create, our ability to perform, whatever it is, we attach parts of us as a part of our value. And yes, those are things that we may be a piece of us or pieces that we can contribute, like with your intelligence. Yes, you contribute to the world with that. But that's not all of who we are. Our value is just because we're human beings. We bring value to the world by being human, and because God loves us, or because of our humanity, not necessarily our looks or what we think or what we do. But when we realize that we're losing something, then we find out how much we may have grabbed onto that thing we're losing as a piece of our value.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was the struggle. That was probably some of my biggest struggles, and the fear, not being fear of being dead, but fear of what I was losing, leaving my children, leaving my grandchildren, leaving my husband. I don't want to do that.
And that's what people say all the time. They don't say they want to live for themselves. They would say they want to live for their children or their partner or their whatever. And it's really interesting. I talked to a lady one time who was trying to write an article because she said she was single and she didn't have children. And people were like, well, what are you fighting for? And she said, I'm fighting for me.
There you go.
I'm fighting for myself, you
Yeah,
know, and it was
right.
a really interesting conversation. Because
Life is
women
worth
typically don't put themselves at the front of the line.
having.
We think about other people,
Oh, yeah, for sure.
you
For
know.
sure, for sure.
Well, what would you want to say to somebody who's newly diagnosed? What would you want to say to somebody? Because I find personally, I know the lifers who stay in treatment. I don't mean to be insensitive to that, but personally, I think it's also another place is hard. It's when you complete treatment and you're well, and they go, see you in a year, and you go, oh, can we
Yeah.
have lunch once in a while? I've
Yeah.
been seeing you every day for
Yeah.
a
Yes.
year. You
Yeah.
know, I feel like you've been broken up with, and that free falling, I think, is emotion hard. So, what do you want to say to the newly diagnosed?
Okay, so the newly diagnosed is advocate for yourself, but also cancer diagnosis is not necessarily a death sentence. You know, we used to, that was the thing that I thought, oh no, this means I could die. It's just an immediate thought. Well, cancer is more often now considered more of a like a maintenance kind of disease. An awful lot of time people can end up with it. It may be what eventually takes them out, but something's going to take us out at some point, and it may not take them out for another 20, 25, 30, for a lot of years. And so get the idea of I'm going to die out of my mind. That's just, yeah, you might not. There's just, we don't need to lean
Right.
into that because it can be so many other things. So
And you talk about leaning into things a lot. So I'm loving that you said that, because I've been meaning to ask you. So what about that person who is what I call free falling? They've gone through the treatment, they're good. And now they're not actively fighting, and they're supposed to go back into the real world like nothing happened to them. That is an uncomfortable place for a lot of people.
And so that discomfort that you're talking about, they're probably asking, I don't know what's wrong. I'm finished. I should be feeling better, but I'm feeling anxious, or I'm feeling depressed, or I'm feeling not safe. I feel like I want to go back to my cancer center, some of them might say. And so when I talk about leaning into, I mean, lean into that so that you can ask yourself, wait, what is this about? What is really at the bottom of, what am I afraid of? So, and because as you lean in and ask those questions, then the real answers come up. No, I'm afraid this could come back. Okay, let's deal with that. And then you're dealing with the real issue, not just I'm free falling. Okay, let's find out why.
Well, and also too, I think what happens is I don't know about you, but for me, the job I was working, I got fired from it. I'm very grateful. My husband was a steady Freddie and still there for me. But I know a lot of people go through divorce. Sometimes it's even the woman's choice to realize, hey, now that I've had this life-changing wake up call, you're not who I want to be with, or I'm going to change something, or launch a new career in a positive way. So there's a lot of positive can come in that leaning in. And I don't think cancer changes you. I think it can reveal you. It doesn't, it's like it refines you a little bit. It reveals things in you.
Yes. I figured out that I had too much of a connection to my looks, to my value. That was something that was revealed through this.
Well, and I think my connection with my brain is the fact that I don't have a college degree. I quit because I ran out of money, didn't finish, and I live in a world with around a lot of people who look down on me because of that. And so I am smart. I just don't have the paper to go with it. I have a lot of college hours, just don't have the paper to go with it. And I've always regretted running out of money, but I ran out of money. You know, so maybe that's a bit of a soft spot for me, you know, my little
It is, and you can lean in. It's because one of the things that eventually comes out of that when you lean is oh, somehow, some way I've gotten a connection in my mind between intelligence and having the paper. But as you just so well said, the paper doesn't prove intelligence. There are plenty of real dumb people that have worked through.
Well, and also too, it was a little bit of anger about the fact that it could have been different. But so I had to let go of that. Now, okay, for the lifers, the people that will never stop treatment because maybe the cancer's advanced, or they have to keep changing lines of treatment, or they're stage 4 and they just have to take those maintenance drugs forever. How do we not dismiss the significance of what they're going through, but yet find joy in daily life? Because to me, that day belongs to you. You should get to have that day every day, and the next day, and the next day.
Right.
How do we talk about that?
So my thought is kick from the knee, kick from the hip answer to that question is that if it's another person, that we let them lead the way as to where they are. If they're really struggling with that, that's where they are right now. And that deserves honor and respect. If they're trying to find a way not to focus so much on their diagnosis and their treatment, then we go that direction with them, but we let them lead the way. Now, I have, as the disclaimer, I'm not stage 4. I have not had a recurrence. And so it would be highly insensitive for me to just tell someone how to feel in that circumstance when I've not been there. However, I can say I've worked with an awful lot of other people who've had horrific traumas in their life, life-changing, horrific traumas in their life, to understand that life-changing traumas, they're kind of across the board as far as how they affect us. And so what I would say to someone who is in that position, their life is not going to change as far as they're not going to ever not be stage 4. And maybe they're not even going to get to NED again, maybe just because, and they may know that. And if that's the case, then what I'm going to say is you can spend every day focusing on the way life hasn't gone the way you would have scripted it. And if you do that, you're going to live in a place that you always feel like it's not going your way. It's bad. There's lack there. And so this negative is going to just seep into everything. And my thought is, if I don't know exactly how much time I've got left, by golly, I want the time I've got left to be good. And the way to not let the cancer steal every step of our joy is to acknowledge that, yes, it's there. We are not about to try to brainwash or gaslight somebody into saying that's not a real thing. It's there and it's real. But it's only a piece of who we are. There's an awful lot more. If we could do a pie graph, we would say that cancer may affect everything. However, it doesn't change the fact of the other things in our life on that graph. I don't know what they are. Do you have family that love you? Do you live in an area where maybe there's some pretty nature things? I mean, do you happen to have a good job? I guess I think the people that I hurt the most for are the ones who stage 4, they don't have any family, they don't have insurance. There are people who have layers and layers and layers of difficulty.
Oh, and that's the thing. And I'm glad you brought up about, not being stage 4 and being sensitive to that, because I would never try to tell somebody how to feel. But one of the things that from my background, I was always a problem solver, jumping ahead, was not what they call an in the moment person. And my husband pointed out to me when the kids were really little one time, as I was planning their college education, and he goes, TL, you might want to make dinner. They're hungry and they're 5.
Right.
Okay. Got it. So I had to pace my long-term planning self into being in the moment. So someone told me, a very wonderful woman who I was a friend with before I got inflammatory breast cancer. I knew she had breast cancer, but I didn't know it was inflammatory. Oh. And she came to see me, and she mentored me a lot. Her name was Cheryl Meslow, and I write about her a lot on the website. But Cheryl said the only way to not go crazy is to be in the moment, or and kind of be in this moment. Don't look too far ahead. Don't look too far behind with regret or whatever. And it wasn't the carpe diem seize today. To me, that's a lot of pressure. People tell me, "Oh, you're dying of cancer. Make every day count." It's like, well, now I'm going to suck at that too. I can't make every day count. And she said, be in the moment. And that helped me get through those really hard times. I call it, the monsters would come in the night when everybody was asleep and there's no one to distract me. And that's when my thoughts would get dark. And I would think, okay, I'm going to die. It's like, am I dying right now? I'm not dying this moment. Okay.
Right. 100%.
And I learned what were my triggers that made me nervous. And I would try to find ways to cope with that.
Sure. I agree with that 100%. I think that is absolutely the best thing, to stay in the moment. And then as we lean into what is in the moment, that's when we find what is going on around me that really most of those moments we really are okay. Now, if we've just been leaning over the toilet bowl retching from chemo, we don't feel okay. But we go back and we sit on our chair. If we really think about it, we can actually say, well, that chemo is doing its task. It may be making me throw up, but I still, as you said, I'm okay in this moment. I don't feel great, but I've got medicine in me that is killing cancer. Yes, I'm having a nauseous response, but it's doing its job. Even in that, there's more than just horror. I have cancer. This is bad. there's treatment, and and this chair is nice. You mentioned that kind of, there's warmth in here. There's my cat, my dog. There's things around us that can remind us that yes, this is something I didn't want, but there's an awful lot going on around me that is wonderful and is a blessing and is something to be grateful for. Where I learned that lesson that was huge for me was in 2011. I had not been married. I was married in 2009. In 2011, my husband had a stroke, and he had it at work, and he's fine, but it was a full-fledged stroke. And every day after that, I was terrified. For a long time, I was terrified I was going to lose him. And he would go out the door to work. I would lean against the door and cry. And I didn't let him know that. I would bye, kiss, love you, see you later, close the door and just cry, be fearful that he was going to happen again, and he would die. And somewhere along the line, I realized, wait, he may die in 40 years, 20 years, 2 weeks, or 2 days. But if I do this every day, then no matter how much time I've got left, I'm giving it up. I'm losing it. I'm not having good times. If I only have him for 2 weeks, then I want 2 weeks of good 2 weeks. I don't want to lose it today because I can't let go of it, and because the fears are overwhelming. So that was a big lesson for me. Yes, if something is going to happen later on in life, it'll happen later on in life, but it's not happening now. And if it's not happening now, I don't need to live in the fear of when it may happen. And one of the things we absolutely know in my office, we deal with anxiety and depression. When people are having anxiety, most of the time, they are not allowing their minds to be where they are. They're usually either in the regret or sadness or grief of the past, or in fear and dread of the future. And if we can bring them to do exactly what you were saying, to come back into what is here and now, unless we're being burned at the stake, here and now tends to kind of be okay.
And it's so important you say that leaning in too, because maybe you are feeling anxious because there's a little warning bell, and maybe you've had a headache every single day for 2 weeks, and you're scared that it could be brain metastasis, but you're scared to make that phone call. Again, lean in and do a little investigation and go, maybe I need to make that phone call.
For that particular one, somebody mentioned this in the group years ago, and this became my answer for that. Once I came up with an answer, then I felt better. My answer is, if I notice a symptom and I'm worried about it, give it 2 weeks. And take note of it, notice if it's better or worse, or comes or goes, different times of the day, pay attention for 2 weeks. And if it's still there in 2 weeks, then call the doctor. Now, I guess there's some symptoms that if they were bad enough, you need to call right away. Certainly if you fainted.
But maybe you are feeling anxious because you've got this little button going off saying, hey, pay attention, and you just don't want to even think about it. So, but I think it's important to lean in and figure out what is making you stressed.
Right. Absolutely. What is this about? What is this about? And a good way to do that, a really good way to do that, is journaling. Our brain has this amazing ability to, when it thinks we're not taking it seriously about something, it keeps pounding us with it. And so we try to not think about it, and it pounds us more, just trying to get the word out. But that journaling, first of all, it opens up the floodgates, and it allows us to think and maybe about things we wouldn't have gone into, but it also tells our brain, oh, she's working on this. I can relax a little bit. I don't have to keep pounding her with the think, be worried. And so literally journaling, I actually think it's best for people to write longhand, because there's something between the hand coordination with what's happening in the brain. But if people really don't like that, and they're only going to do it if they pick up their laptop, then go for it. But just let those words come, and that purges an awful lot of it, and helps you sometimes make sense of what's happening.
I think sometimes it's a great way to release something too. Somebody told me once that, because I had a really rough childhood, and there's things that I can't fix, but there's things that still hurt. And so someone said, write it out on a piece of paper. And then I thought, well, that's not enough. So then I tore up in little bitty pieces, and I set it on fire, and I felt better.
Yes.
It was gone.
Yes. That's a great one. That's a great one. And sometimes I'll tell people to tear it up if they're thoughts that are just tormenting you, and you're trying to stop dealing with the thoughts that are tormenting, and you don't have to go see the doctor, you're just having tormenting thoughts. One of the things I'll say is write it on a piece of paper, tear it into tiny pieces, and flush it down the toilet so it goes down with the other.
I love it.
I don't know what I can say on this podcast, Terry.
You can say whatever you want. I love it.
Flush it with the rest of it.
That might be a great way to end it, because you're giving women a freedom. You're giving women a freedom to be afraid. You're giving women a freedom to ask questions. You're giving women a freedom to be sad. You're giving women a freedom. And who would think that freedom could be in the same sense with the word cancer?
Yeah. Terry, I feel more free as a woman now than I ever did before my cancer diagnosis. And I'm sure it's because we've had to step up and do those. We've exercised those muscles, but that's a good thing that's come out of it for me.
Yeah, my kids tell me I'm different. And sometimes I say, they don't know this in such a good way. It's not that I'm less tolerant. I was always very much a servant. And I find myself saying, no, I want this. They go, what? She never says she. So I was like, what do you want to do? I'm like, I really want to do this. And they're like, whoa. But I was the kind of person, if you stepped on my foot, I would say, oh, excuse me, somehow my foot got under yours. Let me not inconvenience you and pull it out. And then off my foot, and I'm a little bit more, and they're like, whoa, who knew?
She's got words. She can do that.
Well, how would you like to end this? We've been together for a good while. Martha Van Dam. We talk about you all the time on our website, so people might want to reach out to you. They can find you easily. But what would be your closing message you want someone to resonate after they've listened to this conversation?
Let's set aside potential of actual symptoms that we're really looking for. We're really just set that aside and really just talk about the mental piece of it and coping with the trauma, the sadness, all the changes. And what I would say has been one of the most helpful things to me, and I think it's valuable for all of us, is we can look at what's going on in our world, in our life, or our world, but in our life, and we can think of all the things that seem to be going ways that we don't want. We call it going bad, but they're generally going ways we didn't expect, we didn't want. We can focus on that, and that kind of will leave us in the sad, bitter, scared, anxious place. Or we can say, it's a very real part of my life, but it's not all of my life. And so I'm going to focus on what I do have access to right now. I want to focus on what I can do right now and put my focus and my energy there. And what I think it tends to do is it strengthens the can muscles, and it starves out a little bit of the worry, what if muscles, because we're feeding it could come back, but it's not right now. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to spend time with my kids and spend time with my grandchildren and do the writing I want to do. Focus on what I can do right now. Mm-hmm. I can't help everyone in the world understand about IBC, but I can write a blog post. I can make a post. We're going to focus on what we can do. And I can't guarantee that my cancer won't come back, but I can be sure that I'm being as healthy as I can. I can walk as frequently as I can, as my time schedule allows. I can do those things. So focus on those things. And that's not to say the others don't come up, but they don't have maybe quite the place in our lives that they used to. And I think that's major.
I think that's great. I think it's great. And I remember seeing somewhere where they took the words cancer and it said I can do, and they pulled the words out, and it's like, yeah, it's a doable thing. It's a hard thing, it's a doable thing. Yeah. And so, well, great. Well, thank you for being with me today. I've been looking forward to this, and I always love seeing you, and I hope that you'll keep attending. Like when we had the meetup in Nashville, your presence there was just so valuable. And
thank you, Terry. I loved it.
I loved it too. And I'm looking forward to more people hearing you and seeing you and getting to talk to you. So thanks for being on our podcast today.
I'm looking forward to talking to you more later and doing this again, maybe a different topic.
We can do that. We'll see what kind of feedback we get. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Terry. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.